So responsibly raised. So now we're seeing, the cage-free, free range, organic, all these labels. We've seen them a lot. And so work that I'm doing and others are doing is starting to expose that they are not what the industry is saying that they are. So we're going to start seeing new terms and labels that get cycled in and rise. And this is one that we've been seeing recently, responsibly raised, right? We see this with Chipotle's and I've seen this at Whole Foods. So what does this mean? Do they mean ethically? Do they mean environmentally? I mean, it's so vague. It could mean just about anything, right? Whatever you want to think it means. But that unconditionally loved part, this is really, oh, it's just getting into kind of some psychological weirdness here because, I mean, of course, we're not talking about the burrito was unconditionally loved. I mean, what we're seeing is a burrito, but we're talking about the flesh of the animal that was killed and cut up to be put into that burrito. How on earth can you say that someone that was killed, you know, confined and killed at an early age, cut up into this burrito, was unconditionally loved? How, it just, how? Um, wow, it just gets into some very strange stuff. Okay, time-wise, I may skip the next one. Well, I'll just say briefly, we have this thing about romanticizing animals being put out to pasture and being put out on pasture, like free ranging and pasture raised, and think that, oh, well, this is just going to solve all the problems, right? But unfortunately, that is not the case. These are domesticated animals. They are, they are not wild animals. You can't just throw them out onto pasture and think that everything's going to be okay. There's numerous studies that show that pastured pigs, showing these pigs, and I just Googled pastured pigs images, and this kind of clued me into, okay, let's not forget what this is all about, right? Making money. It's not about, no, we don't love our animals. No, they need to make money. And some, having animals out on pasture and free ranging them can put them in even worse situations for different reasons. There's having the just trying to find where well, yeah, okay, so the lighter colored pigs can have painful sunburn and blistering in extreme heat without adequate shade. In extreme cold, they can get frostbite. Piglets have been found with hypothermia, pneumonia. They're more vulnerable to predators. Contact with wildlife and pathogens is also a big problem, like we're seeing with avian flu right now, So anyway, the next slide is a little disturbing. I will go through it quickly, but I just want to remember what we're talking about here. This is the slaughter of an intelligent, sentient being. We'll move on from that and say that there is look at what we want to look at, and that is these animals in their natural, beautiful, sweet, cute state, and there is no right way to do the wrong thing. So I'm going to move on from the humane hoax. I have a lot more in my books, a lot more. I have a website, the humanehoax.org, and we'll have that at the end so you can learn more about this if you want to. But let's move on to our sixth reason. Oh, well, we'll skip that. We'll go on to our sixth reason for living vegan, and that is pandemics. We know all about pandemics now, don't we? A lot more than we did 5 years ago. I'll just read these here on the screen with you. Zoonotic diseases come from unethical and unsanitary interactions with humans and non-human animals. Most of the world's major outbreaks of infectious diseases since 1900 have been due to some form of animal exploitation. The image that I have here, this is a picture that I took outside of a chicken egg farm. And chickens are really easy to hide, right? Chickens are very easy to hide. And so you often don't know when it's a chicken facility for eggs or their flesh. It's just a big windowless warehouse, looks like anything else. But if you see these signs, these kinds of signs, these biohazard, keep out signs, that can clue you in to it being an animal agriculture farm because they know how, how easily the viruses and things spread, and that it is a bio insecure area, which is scary, right? So, many infectious diseases have appeared in recent decades, directly related to humans' exploitation of animals, both wild and domestic. Capturing, confining, breeding, and killing animals is known to be the cause of numerous zoonotic diseases. So, in the case of the COVID pandemic, it's kind of interesting because either source of the virus. So the source of the virus is contested, right? There's two different scenarios that it could have come from. It's being debated. I don't want to get into that. I don't care which one it came from, really, ultimately. My point is that both came from speciesist attitudes and actions, right? Whether it was from the lab that was using animals for experimentation, or the wet market, engaging in wildlife trafficking, right? Both are sources of, reasons for zoonotic diseases are exploitation of animals. In the case of wild animals, we're, now increasingly encroaching on wild areas, capturing animals, taking them from their homes, confining them in tiny, filthy cages for profit. And zoonotic diseases have been, because of this, they have caused numerous epidemics like Ebola, AIDS, SARS, MRSA, all of which originated from butchering and eating wild animals. However, capturing and killing, uh, uh, what is my next slide? Oh, we're not there yet. Sorry. Capturing and killing wildlife is not the only culprit. Farmed animals, also confining farmed animals, the birds, the cows, pigs, goats that we confine and eat, kill and eat, have also been the sources of infectious outbreaks, swine flu, bird flu, the list goes on. Foodborne illnesses like E. coli, Campylobacter, Salmonella, infections like the MRSA bacterium, all rooted in farming and slaughtering animals, right? We could eliminate so much illness, foodborne sicknesses by eliminating animal farming. Um, and then of course there's the antibiotic issue where we're giving so many pharmaceutical drugs, not only antibiotics, but tons of pharmaceutical drugs en masse to these overcrowded, sick animals. And that's causing antibiotic resistance in humans, right? So, it's increasing our threat of one of the most important and effective treatments for so many ailments to be not effective anymore. And another great reason. I mean, it's reason after reason after reason to not farm animals. And I want us to be cautious of, blanket statements like all things that can kill us would be eliminated by not eating animals. That is not the case. That is a generalization. And of course, I want to recognize the nuances in public health, and in this, post-fact era. I want to be very, very, accurate in what I'm saying. And some examples of exceptions to this, what I've been talking about, are that like malaria comes from mosquitoes, Lyme's disease is caused by a bacteria that's carried in ticks. So it's not only animal exploitation. However, zoonotic diseases and all that I've been talking about is frightening enough, right? There's enough. It is huge. And it is the majority of the diseases that are potential pandemics. So, it's frightening enough. So we could very likely prevent the next pandemic by stopping animal products, by having a global plant-based movement and ethic, a global vegan ethic. Um, yeah. So, uh, uh, we'll move on to the last one. I think I've talked enough about the pandemic stuff. Here we go. We're going to go to on to the last of these seven reasons, the seventh reason for living vegan. And I hope we can get into some Q&A so people can ask questions if they'd like further information. But our final reason for living vegan is Ahimsa. So I started this presentation with a possibly new concept to you, and that's speciesism, a term that we don't often hear. And I'm going to end with another concept that may be a new word for you. Maybe you have heard it or know a little about it, but I'd like to dig in deeper, and that is ahimsa. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word. It means nonviolence or non-harming. And, I wanted to talk about this because I personally resonate with it a great deal, and the vegan community has really become inspired by this concept. We're seeing it on like t-shirts and necklaces, and organizations are naming their Facebook group Ahimsa this or that. And so I kind of wanted to give it some context, talk about it a little deeper. Again, it means non-harming. Himsa is the Sanskrit word for harm, and negates it, so it's non-harming or non-violence. But instead of thinking about it as an absence of violence, you can really kind of think about it more as a presence of dynamic compassion, right? Being compassionate in all we do, being non-violent in our words, our actions, even our thoughts. Um, so I think I talked about this a little bit, but there's so many different veganisms, right? There's, health vegans, plant-based vegans, there's philosophical vegans or ethical vegans, lots of different reasons. Environmental, people go vegan for environmental reasons. But for some, it can be, and some get into it this way, or it evolves to be this way, but it can be an expression of our spirituality. And there are spiritual vegans. And I feel that way. I feel that veganism, to me, it encompasses how I feel about spirituality the most of any spiritual, expression that I have seen. Um, and my husband and I have delved deeply, studied deeply the Dharma traditions. Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism is another that isn't as well known, but it's another, the third of the Dharma traditions out of Southeast Asia, out of India, and ahimsa is very woven through these Dharma traditions. And in fact, like with the Jains, it is and with others, Hindus and Buddhists as well, it is, depending, and there's a lot of differentiation as well, but they all have ahimsa running through them, and they all feel that ahimsa is so important. In fact, it's the highest principle for a lot of the Dharma traditions. And and I think it's very important that we as a society, I mean, not just as a vegan community or environmental or whatever, but as a society and as a whole, we have to change who we are and not just what we do, not just our habits. I feel we're too deep into destructive behavior and spiraling into some bad places as a culture and society worldwide. That just changing our habits isn't going to be enough. This is just my personal feeling. I feel that we have to kind of look at, we need a deep shift in our psyche, right? To our priorities as a society, what we care about, what's important to us, what we protect, what we embrace. And I feel that it is crucial that we have a respect and reverence for all of life, for life on this planet, all the animals. And I think that's the only way that we're going to turn the corner on every issue we face, not just what the animals are facing, but every issue, climate change, racism, everything. I really believe that we have to kind of change who we are. And I don't feel that that has to be spiritual or religious, certainly not. There's amazing philosophies out there and philosophical ways to do this too, lots of different ways. But for some, for me, for others. I think that spirituality and this concept of ahimsa can aid, right, and assist in this fundamental change that I truly feel that we need. There's an interesting saying in the Shastra, in the sacred texts of, and this is said in different ways in different texts of these Dharma traditions. If you harm an animal, however many hairs are on that animal's body that you cause suffering, you will be reborn and suffer that many times. Now, this is getting into karma, right? And I have a lot to say about karma. With time, I'm going to just kind of touch on it. If anybody's interested in talking more about karma, I can. But, and I think everyone can kind of agree, right? I mean, even if you don't get so deeply into the religious part of it, I think everyone can agree that what you do comes back to you. What you put out into this world, what energy you put out into this world will come back, right? And so that's where it's, I think, so important for us as, people that are awakening to a different way to live, a different way to move forward to heal this planet. We need to look at what we do and be cautious and conscious of the harm we create, right? This is ahimsa, living nonviolently. So ahimsa shouldn't be translated directly as vegan. That's, kind of not what it means. It's not limited to animals or animal products. It's a broader concept. And in so many of these Dharma traditions, they feel it is the guiding principle, the most important guideline and law. Basically, it's ahimsa paramo dharma means like the supreme law of the universe, or like the highest, best action that you can take in any situation is nonviolent, the nonviolent path, right? It's just beautiful. The ethical imperative, right? So it's just some beautiful concepts. If this is something that's interesting to you, my husband and I, my husband has his PhD in Hindu ethics and his bachelor's in Buddhist studies, and he works for a Jain institution. He's a professor of Sanskrit at a Jain institution. So we have an ongoing online gathering called the Ahimsa Living Circle. It's the every second Saturday of the month, and it's exploring veganism and ahimsa, this concept, and the Dharma traditions. And we do different topics each time. And it's, interactive. It's a meeting. You can pipe in and offer your thoughts as well. So anyway, if anybody's interested, we have that the second Saturday of the month. The next one is going to be on May 10th. So you're welcome to join us. At the end, I'll have the email I'll have my email. You can just email me and get the information. And I'll also have the website for Compassionate Living, my nonprofit. And on Compassionate Living's website is where you can sign up or register. It's free for the Ahimsa Living Circle if it's something that is of interest to you. So I'll just wrap up the Ahimsa part, our last reason for living vegan, by saying that, whether you're into spirituality or religion or whatever, even if you're not, I encourage you to find what gives your life meaning, right? What helps you to participate, to bring about this consciousness shift that we absolutely need. What can you do to create the compassionate, loving vegan world that we all want to see? I inspire you to be I invite you to be inspired by Ahimsa. Whether or not you're into the religious part of it, it's an interesting philosophical concept to ponder. Just really meditating on how we can be more nonviolent in everything we do, every aspect beyond our shopping list, every aspect of our life. And it's important not to just meditate on it, but to take action, right? Of course, to take the actions that can bring harmony to this world out of balance. And being vegan is a great way to start that healing. All right, so I'll just give a plug here for my podcast, the Hope for the Animals podcast. I do interviews with inspiring people that are doing amazing work for animals and the environment, and I also have individual solo episodes where I talk about some of the things that I've been talking about today and other things. So we'll have a link at the end, and I'll just wrap up with a quote from my first book, The Ultimate Betrayal. Most people have compassion for animals in need, and don't want them to die. But their window of compassion is only open for certain species. Open the window wide and let farmed animals into your sight of concern. We would offer assistance to an animal in distress if it was within our ability to help them. Why are pigs, cows, chickens, and I'll add fish, I should have put fish in here, exempt from this compassion? Thank you. All right, that's it. This is my slide with my information on it.
Great. Thank you so much, Hope. And thank you for sharing the information on how people can follow what you're doing and reach out to you. And where can they get your books?
Anywhere you buy books, on Amazon. The second book was published by Lantern Publishing and Media, so you could go directly to Lantern. They're a wonderful publisher of environmental and animal books, so you could go to them directly, but anywhere you buy books.
All right, great. So you shared a lot of information and a lot of it's inspiring. How do you suggest on a broader in broader measure that how people get involved in this type of to do something?
Yeah. Yeah, first I just want to apologize for going so long. This was a new presentation, and you know, anyway, I should condense some things.
No, well,
But
you actually just want to say you're totally fine. A lot of speakers go to to 2:30, to 1.5 hours or even
oh,
longer sometimes. You're
okay,
totally fine. It's great to have a Q&A, but if you have a lot of information to share and it's meaningful, we absolutely encourage that. But
okay, fantastic. Thank you for that. Yeah, so getting involved. I mean, I think the very first and fundamental thing is to live vegan. That's kind of where to start. To be sure that you are in your shopping list and your home products, everything is cruelty free, and that you're not harming animals. And then, as a result of that, you're also doing so much to reduce your carbon footprint. You're doing so much to improve your health. So just living vegan is a great place to start. If you want to go beyond that, if you are feeling comfortable, you've got your vegan thing going and you really want to do more, then I would look at what are your skills? What do you like to do? What do you do in your spare time or for your profession? And can you use those skills to help the movement, to help, what is your interest? If your interest is chickens, if you love chickens, can you maybe volunteer at your local sanctuary? Volunteering doesn't necessarily mean going and helping the chickens. It could mean helping on their social media pages because you're really active on social media. Or maybe it means, doing their taxes because you are a tax expert, whatever. There's so many ways to help that we don't think of. Like, we think of activism as one thing, going out and holding a sign, or something like that. But that's just one aspect of the movement. There's so much help and assistance that can be offered in so many different ways. So find what your skills are. Also, I would say another aspect to that is what is sustainable for you and what you're going to enjoy. Some people go into it thinking, oh, leafleting is so important. I'm going to go out and pass leaflets around. But that takes a very specific personality, very specific kind of person. And if you're not that outgoing and you don't enjoy leafleting, then you're not going to do it often. And so that doesn't really help, right? So find the things that you enjoy, that you feel you're good at, and that they're going to be sustained, that you're going to do in the long term.
great, thank you so much, and I definitely appreciate the idea of people contributing the way that they're best able to contribute as opposed to one size fits all activism. So do you find in the environmental movement that there's a high rate of veganism given how powerful the data is with regard to animal agriculture
Mm.
and its impact on all of the things in the environmental movement? And to the extent that people don't go vegan, what's the pushback within the environmental movement?
Yeah, very interesting question. There's a lot there. So I would say, so, the information is coming out, which is great. I mean, if you go back 2 decades ago, nobody even knew that there was environmental impact in the animal agriculture industry, and mainstream journalism, mainstream information didn't have it. That has changed. Now the information is kind of out there. I mean, you'll see, some mainstream journalism or a movie or whatever, documentaries that will now say, when there's in how you can reduce your environmental impact along with taking shorter showers and, these things that are minimal impact, they will include your diet and increase and decreasing animal products. That will be included. So we're kind of, that's good. That progress is really good. We're starting to accept that food has a huge environmental impact. But when you get into the environmental movement and people that are actually environmentalists, unfortunately, there's systems thinking and thinking that counters the vegan narrative in that they feel that individual change doesn't really do much. Individual change, it's not going to help much. We have to look at the system. We have to look at system change, right? And I agree that we need both, right? Yes, we need systems change, of course. But we also need individual change because that individual change is what drives the markets. That individual change is what will inspire the systematic change and what will support. It's the foundation for that systematic change to take place, like that pushes the systematic change, right? But it's unfortunate that a lot of environmentalist people that I have met, they're like, yeah, I'll eat a little vegan, but they don't think it's important enough. And that is tragic because it's very important. I mean, if you look at the progress that we have made uh, in just the products that are available, now you go into it doesn't even have to be a natural food store, any supermarket, you're going to be able to find some vegan plant-based meats and some, products that are vegan oriented products, right? And then you go into the health food stores and it's abundant. You've got so much option for plant-based meats and cheeses. Now, I don't think that these are the healthiest or best options. Of course, they're transition foods. People should just use them sparingly. But it certainly helps. It's certainly better. Environmentally, it's hugely better. So how did we get there? How is that happening? Individual change, individual demand from vegans, right? Vegan, plant-based people going in and wanting that food, wanting those changes, demanding those changes from the market. It wasn't a systematic change. I mean, it was definitely individual. So we've come a long way. We've done great work for, decades. Let's keep that momentum going. Let's not let that, systems only thinking be what quells individual change. I think individual change is still so, so important. So hope that helps.
Absolutely. And I want to tie that concept with this one way of thinking with something that you were talking about during your presentation, which is what I noted as industrial sleight of hand, where the egg industry basically said, oh, focus on cage-free chickens, cage-free eggs. And first of all, was there anybody saying, hey, let's have cage, instead of let's not eat eggs or let's not, use chickens for this, were they saying, hey, let's let them, be out of the cage? Was there a movement for that they responded to and they chose the one? Or did they just say, hey, everybody, we're going to just say that we do this now and that means we're good and this is what you want to focus on as a consumer?
Right. Well, I think that it was, it's a lot of things, but yeah, as an animal advocacy movement, we really honed in on the battery cages in the egg industry as one of the worst of the worst, because it certainly is. I mean, it was absolutely horrible having these chickens in these cages where it's like basically living in a crowded elevator your entire life, just a horrible situation. So we really honed in on that. But I think we were afraid as a movement to really, and this is, this is different amongst different organizations and depending on, the lean to welfare and rights and all of that. But I think we were afraid to have that coupled with the go vegan message. It's like, oh, we don't want to push people too much. Let's just point out the suffering. But I think it backfired on us in that, yeah, okay, the industry said, oh, you don't like the cages? No problem. We'll get them out of the cages. Now you've got cage-free eggs, and we as an animal advocacy, we're like, well, wait. That's not the only thing, That's not the only thing that's awful, but that's the result. So I think this is a reason and why we have to be not afraid to say live vegan, to take it all the way to no, we should not be eating animals. There's no right way to exploit and confine and kill animals. We just can't do it humanely. And that's what the industry is now telling. It's a great way to say it, the sleight of hand. It's really true. It's there, that's what all these labels are, is that they're just trying to make the focus, to shift the focus over here, what they want you to see. Look, we're improving, we're doing better, when in reality, the entire industry, it's worse for animals than it's ever been. But if you look at the labels, you look at the websites, you look at the products, it looks like everything's improving. But that's just marketing sleight of hand. Yeah.
So going back to what you're talking about with the environmental movement, is it possible that the environmental movement is kind of controlled by some industrial forces where they're saying, oh, don't push this, so that way they're getting the end result in the end, which is people pretty much are doing what they're doing, and then we tend to have things, solutions that are centrally controlled and wildly profitable for central figures.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It really goes deeply into legislation and the meat and dairy lobby. There's a huge meat and dairy lobby. Meat and dairy interests are heavily funded. They go into the legislature, the Congress, and they lobby for their own interests. There's not really a broccoli lobby, the veggies, the fruits, they don't have the money, influence, power that the meat and dairy industry does. And so laws get passed. The Farm Bill, is coming up right now, and they get their own interests taken care of. And yeah, things like regenerative grazing, all these kinds of things are their quote unquote solutions and things that they say are moving us in the better direction. When really we're so out of time environmentally and as far as, looking at climate disruption, we are so out of time and we've got to make this shift much faster. And really what needs to happen for all the reasons that we are considering vegan health, certainly, and the animals, we need to start putting that money, all of the subsidies, all of the exemption, they get money when crops fail, things like that. All that money, I'm trying to think of what the word is for that, but
Subsidized?
yes, well, subsidies, yes, subsidies and all that help, that government assistance, that money needs to be going into the plant farming, plant vegetable farming, vegetables and fruits. We could, we just need to eliminate the help that animal products get, and that would help a lot. Because then the price of a burger, the price of dairy, the price of eggs, it just skyrockets. And that's why I actually, just really quick, I'll just say, Free From Harm is a great organization, and I'm on their email list. They just put out an email that had a video of one of the agriculture executives that was connected to the egg industry. And because of the avian flu, he was basically saying that, that because of subsidies and because of all this government assistance, they're going to be just fine. And so that it's awful. Yeah, anyway.
Um, is the vegan movement still growing? I feel like in maybe the mid-teens, it seemed like it was on fire. There's like all the foods were coming out, and it seemed pre-COVID. Do you find that that it's still on an upward ascension, or has it plateaued? What are your thoughts?
Oh, the vegan movement?
Yes.
Oh, I think it is going strong,
Okay.
way stronger than it ever has. But it looks different now. There is a lot of young people involved, but they are they're wanting to get in and get jobs, right? And so there's a lot of people working on the larger organizations that do things like the cage-free campaigns, where they're encouraging cage-free. So there's a lot of different aspects of the movement. Everything from the radical rights to the corporate welfare campaigning. So, it shifts and flows. I think that we were in a very radical place in like the 90s where it was mostly protests and, grassroots. And that has really shifted now to a lot of large organizations that are doing work on the corporate level, on the legislative level. I think we need it all. I don't think one is better than the other, but I think there needs to be a balance, because one supports the other and they're both very important. So I think there has been a bit of a shift to the corporate side a little bit, to the welfare side. But when you look at the numbers, the numbers are still growing. There are still vegans worldwide. The vegan numbers are growing. I don't think it has plateaued. I mean, there are different numbers out there, and you have to look at the studies. You have to really dig in to, what questions did they ask? What's really going on? But just looking around your own community, you can see, you can tell there are more vegans than ever. There are more vegan options than ever. So it's certainly a growing movement.
And what are the challenges for communicating with non-vegans to kind of effectively inspire them to, if not go vegan, maybe understand it a little bit better or move in that direction?
So for non-vegans is what you're asking.
Correct.
I think that it really depends. It depends on the person. If I'm having a conversation with someone, I like to ask questions and see where they are. What are their concerns? What do they care about? Do they care about their companion animals or their dogs or cats? And then maybe we talk about how cows and pigs and chickens are just as sentient, just as emotional as their dogs and cats. Maybe they're concerned with the climate and climate change and environmental impact. Then we talk about, the environmental impact of animal agriculture, or maybe they're concerned with their health and they are having a health challenge. Then we can talk about that. So I think because there's so many different reasons, there's not one, go-to thing that I use or talk about. I think that it's personal to each person. I think one thing that I would say maybe as a general is to not beat yourself up if you slip. That's something that happens. People are they get into it. It's sometimes for some people it's like quitting smoking. You have to take it. You have to try again and again, right? It doesn't just happen overnight. So it's a progress. It's it takes time, and if you slip, don't beat yourself up. Just take it a day at a time, go back and reset, and try again. Yeah.
And there's a certain level within some in the vegan movement that are of purity, where you have to be perfect. Does that ever is that ever counterproductive in your experience? For I'll give you an example of a conflict that I've seen in the vegan community, which is when Beyond Meat did some animal testing in order to get into China, and where they ultimately would, the net benefit would be to save millions of lives at the cost of some lives. And do you find that call for purity can be counterproductive, and how do you navigate that? Because obviously, people are trying to be as good as they can be, but it can prevent the impact that they ultimately want.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a tough question because, do I feel that, it's, I mean, to me, even one animal suffering and killing is too many, ultimately. So, I do believe in the vegan ethic of absolutely, no meat, dairy, eggs, no animal exploitation. But of course, there's gray areas. There's going to be gray areas. There's going to be nuance in everything. And I think what I would say is that for you personally, be as pure as you want. Be as pure as you feel, you need to be. But be nonviolent, ahimsa, bring ahimsa into your communication with others. When you're communicating to others about your purity and the way you feel about all this, be understanding and loving and gracious to others. When we start shaming others for whatever they have decided to do, that's when it's counterproductive, I think. That's when, we are, and there's a thing called the backfire effect in communication, where if you are, just drilling in your point and you're, my point, I'm right, what it does is it makes the other person, the other side, dig into their side deeper. And no, I'm right. And you get into this back and forth and this argumentative, and it's actually counterproductive. You're not bringing them over to your side. You're just pushing them into their side, their corner further. That can happen. So I think that we need to look at our communication methods and try to be understanding, try to, not shaming, not blaming, but showing, hey, I do this because I feel this is, what's best and most important and important to me. So yeah. And there's there's gray areas. It's tough. We don't want to compromise our stance. I would say that you don't want to say, sure, it's okay for you to eat meat. No, we have to stay strong in our stance and in our, the line that we don't want to cross. But if someone is over that line, to try to be compassionate and understanding, and that's going to possibly bring them in more. Yeah.
So in with the beyond conundrum that I gave as an
Mm.
example, how would you suggest navigating that? Right, where the ultimate goal is to save millions of lives in China
Uh-huh.
while feeding the people there, but yet you're gonna have to harm a certain number of people
You're going to make me come
or
down on
not
one
people.
side or the other of this. I don't want to.
Okay. Well, I won't.
I
I
mean,
won't.
it's tough. It's very tough. And I see both sides. I really do. I understand. I understand being so adamant that we should not compromise no matter what. I get that, but I also get that sometimes some compromise needs to be made. And I think that this is not a situation where I would have to come down on one side or the other, so I'm not going to.
Fair enough. So we live in a culture where people really beat themselves up physically with regard to their health, which is
Mm.
why we have a conference like this. And as part of Ahimsa, there's the concept of self-love and doing no harm or not being violent to oneself. How do we even begin to broach this concept to people who've been enculturated to not even really even see themselves or treat themselves with that sort of nonviolence that embodies this philosophy?
Well, it's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I mean, I think that we do need to be gentle with ourselves. We live in this modern society. We're so full of anxiety. I mean, and now, with the political situation, no matter what side you're on, it's chaotic, it's insane. And it's, I don't know. I think that we have to look at our own lives and and this is something that we talk about in the Ahimsa Living Circle, actually, is, how can we find peace within our own bubble so that we can bring peace to the world? I mean, if we can't find our own, centered, not self-centered, our centering ourselves. That it's hard. It's very difficult. And, some of the things that I have suggested is to, of course, find ways that you self-soothe in not in harmful ways. Like we all self-soothe, right? We all do things that, kind of like calm our whatever it is, either it's anxiety or depression or whatever that is. And sometimes that can be food, sometimes that can be bad habits like alcohol, cigarettes, whatever it is, all those things are kind of self-soothing. My suggestion is to find things that are self-soothing, but that are also good for us, that are also going to be uplifting to your psyche, to your being, to your health, to everything. And that could be, taking a walk in nature. That could be just sitting outside for a moment. Even if you can't drive somewhere to get to nature, whatever. Just if there's a tree near you, sit near that tree. Just take a moment to connect to the natural world. I think that is so important. Maybe connecting with your companion animals and really taking a moment with an animal. Or it could be a wild animal, a bird, whatever it is, just focusing in on them and, being with that animal. There's lots of different things. I mean, the list could go on and on, but things that take us out of this state that are, this churning of our mind, and bring us into a focused place, um, to try to calm that anxiety or whatever it is that you're feeling. And that, just doing that several times a day, as many times a day as you can, and moving that into a meditative practice is a great thing to do. So it's very important to self-care is so important, in this world. We have so little of it. And self-care doesn't necessarily mean like a spa day or a bubble bath or whatever. I mean, those things are good for you too, and that's fine, but it can look like a lot of different things.
So the first of the 7 things you talked about on your list was speciesism. And when we look back at least modern Western culture, it seems like through that whole period, we've been speciesist, if that's the right way of saying that.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
has there been a time in our culture where we weren't, or have there been other cultures around the world who lived in much better harmony than we have? Because even I think the natives here, they get glorified for being environmentalists, although they wildly landscaped the environment to suit their needs. And they hunted animals and whatnot. So is there, historically anyone that we can, any culture that we can look at as an inspiration?
Huh. Okay. Well, this is a little out of my wheelhouse, but and I don't want to speak to anything that I don't know. So I will speak to what I do know, and that is India and the Dharma traditions. And it's one of the reasons that I was drawn to the Dharma traditions, to Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, is because they didn't have so much of this species barrier that I found with my Christian upbringing. I was raised Southern Baptist, born again Christian in the South. And it's a reflection of our Western culture in that we have this very human-centered, human superiority thing. And I remember I always loved animals ever since I was a little girl. I was very connected to animals. I said I was going to work with animals when I was very little, my mom tells me. And my grandmother one time said to me, well, now don't forget, animals don't have souls. And I remember thinking, Grandma, I think you're wrong. I don't see that. I mean, I didn't, say that when I was 7, but it's how I was feeling. And when I actually went atheist because I just was not resonating with Christianity. But when I found the Dharma traditions, they have this connection to nature, I feel, in a much deeper way. Maybe and there are eco-theological Christians that, that have that aspect and bring that aspect out, but I'm just talking about kind of what is generally presented. But the Dharma traditions have this aspect where, every animal has a soul. In not in all the traditions, Buddhists don't believe in a soul, but in most of them, and you can reincarnate as an animal, come back as an animal, come back as a human, back to an animal. There's not this species barrier so directly that we have in the Western mind, right? Between human and animal. It's much more fluid in Eastern cultures and Indian cultures. So I really loved that. I was very, very drawn to that. So that's an example of a very ancient, thousands of years old tradition that certainly doesn't have the same species barrier and has reverence for nature, reverence for animals. Animals are represented in they're deified and made into gods in reflection of God. So, yeah, a lot there that's very interesting.
I remember, 20 years ago, a documentary came out, called something along the lines of, why dogs smile and chimpanzees cry, or something like that. And it was basically a documentary saying, oh, actually, animals have feelings, right? And as if that's an epiphany when we can see, when your dog's happy, when your cat's not happy with you. And it's so apparent. What is it that, or how does it, how is it that we can see it with our own eyes, that they express emotions, and then yet still have this cognitive dissonance that they feel nothing?
Yeah, how? I don't know. I think that what's happened is that like you said, cognitive dissonance. I think that there's a bit of guilt that goes on. We love animals, we eat animals. There is a real cognitive dissonance going on there. So people have to justify and figure out in their mind how they can kind of wrap that up and wrap their mind around that. So I think that it helps to kind of look at, like I was talking about, farmed animals in this other category, look at farmed animals as kind of less emotional. Like they don't have the same emotional complexity. They don't have the same, need for families or friends or whatever. They're just not like us, right? They don't have that emotional complexity. And that helps, I think, to soothe our guilt around what's happening to them and the food that we eat. So yeah, I mean it seems so obvious to us, but I think when you are in a place of, that you don't want to change, you don't want to think about it, you don't want to face the reality that you could be causing suffering. And I don't think anybody wants to cause animal suffering. I mean, that is universal. People, I mean, unless you're, some there's maybe exception of some psychopath or something, but
Yes, yeah.
most people, yeah, most people, don't want to cause animals suffering. And if they could help animals, they will. If there's an animal on the side of the road that's in pain and there's something they can do about it, they will try to help. But then they'll go and eat a turkey sandwich is too much, 2 minutes later. So we have this really weird thing going on, and I think it just helps people to soothe their consciousness, to believe that they are unfeeling or they're not sentient. So that is my job to show that they are sentient and that they do have these complex emotions, and that you can live without eating them. I've been vegan for 35 years and I am thriving. You don't need it. We don't need it. And it's so much easier now than it was then. So, yeah.
So over the last, 10, maybe 20 years, you touched on this during your talk. There have been a lot of people who've gotten into the backyard chickens. Is
Mm.
that positive? Is that negative? Um, with regard to the environmental impact. I mean, they're doing it on land they already have, so they're not like knocking down trees for it. And yeah, so basically, what do you think about the home, the backyard chicken movement, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, well, ethically, there's a lot of issues there. Environmentally, sure, it may be a little better, but you're still having to buy feed that was grown somewhere else. So there's land use and water use and all of that to feed
Mm,
the chickens instead of buying grain to just cook your own rice. So there's some resource waste there. And I think people just ethically they get into it. I mean, I think people get into backyard chicken keeping, I think mostly for good intentions or with good intentions, with good reasons and good intentions. I don't think that they go into it thinking they're going to harm animals. However, they don't realize that, chickens take a great deal of care. It takes, you're going to have to find a vet that if you want, I mean, there's these problems that just start to spiral and happen. The chickens get sick. The chickens aren't well. How do you find a vet that could care for chickens? It's very hard to find. Okay, well, what do we do? The chickens will end up sometimes suffering without care. So there's that. Then what do you do if you suddenly have a rooster, like I talked about, and you got to get rid of the rooster? And what do you do? What do you do if the chickens don't lay eggs when they start to not lay eggs anymore? Is it worth your while? So there's so many factors involved that I think people don't think it through. And you also want them. There's so many aspects of their care that they need stimulation, they need friends, they need predator protection. That's another huge thing that
mm,
happens is that all the wild animals, dogs, anyone can get in there at night and kill the chickens. I mean, I had my sister-in-law had numerous chickens that she did not have a well predator-proofed coop, and she had numerous chickens die a violent and horrible death because of that. So there's a lot of issues there. There's a lot of things going on with
right.
backyard.
And even with the predator proof, you're looking for maybe up above or on the ground, but they'll even dig underneath. It's
That's
pretty
right. Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it's pretty insidious.
yeah.
So during the fish talk, you talked about uh eutrophication,
Eutrophication, yes, yeah.
eutrophication, and that's the
Eutrophication.
loss of oxygen in water. Is that okay? Is there any environmentally friendly way to undo that, or are these just dead zones
Oh,
that?
that is beyond my scientific knowledge. I don't know. I assume that just stopping the source of the pollution and leaving it alone would be a great place to start. And then I assume that it will, eventually renew. There may be some technological ways that we could speed up that process, but just let's start with not putting the chicken waste into the water in the first place.
Great. And are home aquariums okay? What are your thoughts on that for the quality of the life for the fish? I mean, people put a lot of thought into them,
Yeah.
but is it a good environment, a healthy environment for them?
This is very interesting. I would say absolutely not, unless you are rescuing fish. And there is a whole movement of people that are rescuing fish, not buying, because you don't want to support the industry. You don't want to give money to the industry. I mean, this would be like, think about if the room you're in. What if the room you're in was down at the bottom of the ocean and that was all the space you had to live for the rest of your life? And there's so many other aspects too. No, it's not ethical at all to keep a fish tank, I don't feel. However, there are rescues that are rescuing fish in need that let them live their life out. So if you really want to have fish, if you really want to experience that, you can rescue fish. There's a fish rescue called Friends of Philip, fish rescue, Friends of Philip, and there's others where you can learn how you can rescue fish and treat them as humanely as possible.
Thank you. So we just have a couple of minutes here. What gives you hope for the future?
Ah,
In a minute or so.
Well, it's funny because I asked this question at the end of my podcast of all my guests. So now it's being asked to me. Um, you know, I am hopeful. What's hopeful to me is that I have seen the trajectory of 35 years vegan. Like I have been vegan for 35 years, and I have been privileged to see from 1990 to now the amazing progress we have made. We have made so much progress in just the amount of vegans, how many people are excited about it, how much people know what the word means. People didn't even know what the word meant back then. Now people know what it is, and how much vegan food there is. I mean, back when I was first vegan, I had a sweet tooth. And if I wanted a cookie, if I wanted a cake, I had to bake it. There was nothing. There was nothing. So now there's an abundance of vegan food. I can get a vegan donut. I mean, life is good, we've seen such a huge change, and such a huge snowballing. It's gotten bigger and better, and I think I really do feel that eventually we will get there. Here's something else that gives me hope. I'll be real quick. We don't need everyone. Everyone thinks we need everyone. We don't. We just need a critical mass of early adopters, people like you, people like me, people like the people that at this conference. We are the change makers. And if we can be vocal and in a loving way and get people to go vegan and to live healthy and to live non-violently, that is going to change the whole world. So I am very hopeful that we will get there eventually.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your talk today.
Thank you, Michael. Great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we can unmute the audience, please.
Thank you so much.
So great.
Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Hope.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Hope.